Welcome back to Control Alt Dev, and first of all, apologies listeners, and of course to Paul. You've had to survive without my dulcet tones and instead endure an extended solo from Paul. But for those that care, I was taken out by the neurovirus. I was technically still working because apparently, according to my wife, I don't know how not to, but it completely wiped out my voice and left me coughing non-stop, which would not have made for great listening. But I'm back now, healthy, upright and full of life. So let's get into the world of AI. Did the world stop whilst I was sick? Of course it didn't. How are you, Paul?
I'm good, thank you, Sean. I'm so glad you're back with me as well. I think the last episode was cringe to listen to this morning. So no more 20 minutes Paul solo, which would be good. But yeah, it's so good to see you being so energetic and well as well. So we'll get straight into today's episode. It's going to be an absolute corker. We've got Tim Winstanley from Resolve Tech. And he is basically got 40 years plus experience in software. He's been an electronics engineer for the MOD. He's had a software development career, which he's going to talk about. He's then opened up his own business as software developers and then actually transitioned for the last 28 years into being an MSP. But now, through AI, he's back in software development land. So I'm really excited to hear all about that and learn about his transition back into software.
Hi Tim, so forget the LinkedIn bio, who are you really and how did you end up chewed up in the software meat grinder with the rest of us?
Well, it was through choice. I actually really wanted to do it. I am that old. When I was at school, I've got an older brother, a lot older than me, who bought one of the very early computers. We're talking in the 70s. I was absolutely fascinated by it, but there was literally no career path. I think they had things like, what do they call them? Data analysts. I'm still not really quite sure what they are. And my path was to follow what my dad did and to work for the MOD in electronics. And I kind of just gravitated towards digital stuff, followed the pretty standard route of electronics, service engineer, that kind of thing. Ended up at a brilliant company in Great Malvern. Sadly, no more. They'd taken over, called Camtech, that did CAD/CAM software. But I was an electronic service engineer. And these guys were absolute bloody visionaries. Didn't realise it, but they were. They were the first company in the world, as far as I know, to produce CAD/CAM software using Microsoft Windows in 1990, I think it was. And so we're really talking bleeding edge stuff. And they felt this was going to be the way forward. They were absolutely spot on. But these guys had brain the size of planets. They really were serious individuals. And I thought, I didn't see it as a career opportunity. I just felt that it might be quite cute to write a bit of software to convert one format configuration file that we used in DOS to the Windows format. And I still look on it fondly. It took me 3 months to do it, which should have probably taken me an afternoon, but you've got to start somewhere. Got the bug. Look at me, look what I've done, like a little 5-year-old showing his parents something that he's found in the back garden. And I ended up doing a little company database in Windows. The big change, the big thing, and I was thinking about this in terms of like what's comparable to AI, and I don't think it is as big. But for me and a lot of people in the company, Visual Basic version 1 coming out was like rocket fuel. It was like, what the hell has just happened? Right? Because these guys that I was working with, the programmers, remember I was going out on site doing electronics, fitting equipment in machine shops to send the stuff that they were drawing to machine tools. A lot of these guys weren't working in C++, they're working in C, okay? I mean, this just seems like pure masochism now, okay? They're writing their own message pumps and things. It's unbelievable what they were doing. They didn't really have any choice. And Visual Basic came out, and I'm thinking, well, there's got to be something that I can do here. This looks like fun. And I was dead lucky. Because the MD, who was a technical director, as in he wasn't a managing director in the sense of managing the company. He was very much the key behind the software. So I like this. I don't think he thought I was a genius programmer. I think he just thought, this is useful. And in keeping with a lot of small companies, our sales team, I say this with all love and affection, but I think they would sometimes sell things that didn't really exist. It's a slightly
that's every sales team.
Yeah, I think it is.
I don't think that's the
I was going to say that is definitely the world of software when I'm with software development.
Yeah, well, I was sat in my office, that dates it, doesn't it? Because we all had offices in those days. Probably preparing for the next site visit to some machine shop to install industrial computers. And the sales director, the top salesman, and the MD came into my office. I thought, oh, hello. Well, I'm not getting sacked if the salesman's just come in. That doesn't happen. So what have I done wrong? And they just said the immortal words, you like databases, don't you? I'm not quite sure how I can really answer that. And I just decided to say yes. And they said, good, because we've sold some software. And we would like you to, we think you can write it, which is quite a big deal, actually, because this is 1993, and they sold it to a massive company, and it was a complete end-to-end data management system that took the drawings, that took the engineering stuff, toolkits, all sorts of stuff, would display it on an industrial PC, and then would push it out to the machines. Well, they didn't have a spec, actually. I had
Vaporware.
yeah, well, it was, but it was worse than vaporware, because I had to go down to the customer. They didn't tell me to do this, but it was like, so what is it that we're doing for you? And I didn't quite say it as badly as that. I should give myself a bit more credit. Anyway, I wrote it, and actually, to be fair, it was a pretty big success. I mean, this isn't mass market stuff. It was a bolt-on, and they did start selling it with their system all over Europe. The bad thing, and I don't blame them for this, but the bad thing was I'd spent 18 months writing this and doing nothing else. I loved it. I really was in a world of like, this is great. This
Were
is
you
what I
given
want
the
to do.
freedom then to do that? Because a lot of development
Mate,
teams don't have that. Like 18 months on a project sounds insane, doesn't it?
well, in fact, it's worse than that, because I was an electronic engineer, or field service engineer, if you like. No. I mean, absolutely no track record other than a VB2, by this time it would have been, database called Winbase that I wrote, that just listed all the customers that we'd got. That was it. That was all I got. I came to the conclusion that these guys that wrote the software were not what you would call software developers in the traditional sense. They were actually probably highly academic mathematicians, because the stuff they did was all 3D, mesh. They pioneered a system for what's called punching and nibbling, fabrication, where you're punching in sheet metal, where they worked out if they could save 2 or 3%, the average saving that a company would make would be 30 or 40 grand a year. I mean, this is maths. And I think they looked at me with a database, and it was almost too, I don't know, but they just left me to it. And I can remember waking up early in the morning, quite a number of occasions, thinking, Christ, how am I going to get this done? I've kind of taken a leap here. And if this goes wrong, I have lost everything.
And it was just you on the project?
Yeah, I know. I literally, just me. And I cut this very, very shortly, but the problem is the lack of formality about this is quite shocking. I think they had a bit of a lack of formality about what they did as well. But I got it completed. The customer loved it. I mean, they really loved it. They were a massive company, multinational. And they came back to me and said, right, okay, so about Monday, you need to get back out there and get installing these industrial PCs. And I mean, I was upset. I don't blame them for saying it. That's absolutely fair that they said that, because there was no other project for me to do.
It wasn't your job role at the time.
No.
This was like a special project. So your job role was a field service engineer.
Yep.
And instead you'd spent 18 months learning Visual Basic and built.
Well, it moved on from that, because halfway through, I sussed out that Visual Basic couldn't do what I needed. And so I went for Delphi. I just went to them and said, I look back, and the backing that I got was pretty incredible, or I was very credible, maybe a bit of both.
Yeah.
Because I said, I needed to write a screensaver. I mean, I think it's part of my character. I never tread very, very in a shallow pool. I just jump in basically up to my neck. It's the way to see whether you can swim. And I went to them and said, it was 1995. Delphi will solve this problem. Will you authorize the spend? And they went, yeah, okay, yeah, get on with it. And I did it. And I remember getting in quite high dudgeon at the end. You know, I'm a developer. Oh God, it's embarrassing now.
Is that what made you take the leap then? Because at this point in your journey, like you're using, I mean, for the listeners, like, you've mentioned Delphi, you mentioned Visual Basic. They're words
Yeah.
you don't hear much anymore today. So
No,
these
no.
are like
Well,
legacy.
even the word screensaver, which automatically activates a computer
Yeah.
when it's been idle for a set period of time. I mean, that people.
I'm sorry,
You,
yeah,
men-
I am
you
that
mean you
old. Yeah,
mentioned it, and I'm like, oh my god, I've forgotten all about that.
Yeah.
screensaver. Yeah.
Well, my question was, so you're a Delphi developer. You've been put back into your role, which is
Yeah.
service field engineer.
Yeah.
So what did you do next? Did you stay as a field service engineer for 30 years, or
No,
bit of a
well,
leading
clearly,
question?
clearly not. So my formal qualifications are in electronics. So that is where my qualifications are. So I was an electronic engineer with the Ministry of Defence, and so that's where my background was. My brother, as I mentioned earlier, 7 years older. To be fair, looked out for me. He, at the time, had decided to go on a couple of years around the world. And I'd already decided I wanted to get a job as a programmer. And, sometimes you can talk the talk, but then, and somebody offered, well, there were two companies, one in Halesowen, and I can't remember their name, and a company in Birmingham called CSM that offered me a job. And it was another sliding doors moment. They offered me the same salary that I was on, but they didn't offer me a car. You wouldn't offer a programmer a car normally. That was not something, but a field service engineer kind of needs to get to where they're going, and company car tax wasn't really a problem in those days. And I remember saying to my brother in a conversation over Sunday lunch, well, what do I do? And he said, you've got to take this. This is what you want to do. You've got to take it. And I said, look, I've got 3 young kids. This is a problem. It's in Erdington. I live in Worcester. That's 106 miles a day. And he said, I'm going around the world. Have my car. You can just have it. Don't sell it without giving me first refusal on it. And he gave me his car. I mean, it was a beat up Peugeot diesel, but it was a car.
Yeah.
And that enabled me to take the job. An aspect, again, that again ages me is the Y2K bug, the Millennium bug. Well, but the thing was that, again, these are everything lining up in the right way. I didn't realise it at the time, but I did shortly afterwards, how the City of London had an insatiable appetite. It was like a vacuum of developers. And the consequence of that was that companies in Birmingham, well, probably all over the country, lost good people because they were just sucked into London. So these companies were then making decisions that they might not have made otherwise. They were thinking, this guy, I'm guessing, he must have thought, this guy comes across well at an interview, he's got a track record, he's passed our tests, he hasn't got the potential, the qualifications we might necessarily look for, we're going to take a chance. So I'm guessing that's what happened. So, yeah, in September, October 1995, I went to work for CSM in Erdington, and I didn't speak to anybody there other than hello for about 7 weeks because I was utterly terrified of being found out.
As like the imposter syndrome.
I massively, absolutely massively. I mean, the worst thing was, and this is the Y2K, I was sat in a room with 6 other developers, and then one guy that had been there the longest and was a seriously clued up guy was paid $5,000 a year less than me. And you're sitting there thinking, oh shit. If this gets out and he finds out how crap I am,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly I wasn't crap.
Do you know? I think a lot of us relate to that because if I think back, I started off with COBOL. That was the
Oh right, yeah.
Boss COBOL. We got given these manuals, and I'd literally been learning Pascal at university. And I can even remember thinking exactly the same, Tim. I sat there and went, I think I was in tears. I went home and went,
Yeah.
I've gone and got this job, £21,000 a year, which was fantastic coming out of university, thinking, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm a fraud. There's no way I can just suddenly learn this language from learning Pascal at university. And I think you're right. Sometimes, how do you take on these job roles? The only way you can do it is to jump in, isn't it?
Yep. And I think it's probably true in everything that I've seen since, that in any workplace, you've got like I don't know if it's an 80-20 rule, but you've probably got a small percentage of people who are really clear. Oh, this sounds a bit it's not meant to be arrogant, but you tend to get a small percentage who are really enthusiastic. Then you've got a lot of people who are just doing a job and they're fine. And then you get the people at the other end who are wondering how they're managing to hold a job. And you realise once you've been there a while that you sit somewhere in the spectrum of being enthusiastic to be or to good or whatever. I could just see after 6 or 7 weeks when I started making contributions that people went, "Oh, that's interesting." And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Paul, when you sort of said you were unsupervised. Nobody was looking at this.
Yeah.
And you can sink or
yeah.
swim in this. It's risky for a company to do this. Although I'd come back to the way that using AI for code is actually quite similar to that.
Yes.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see the analogy there. But it very similar. You fly by the seat of your pants, but I've got a customer telling me what he wants, and I can't back out of it. So I've got pressure to deliver, which sometimes isn't there. If you're your own boss developing your own software, you can get a thorny problem and somehow conveniently repurpose the spec around the problem. I've seen it done. And yeah, well, that's difficult. Well, they don't really want that. We'll do that. And I've got a customer going, no, we want this. The screensaver thing, I mean, it was actually vital because of the technology that we were using, and it would have been a massive problem.
So it was from a security aspect, it was critical.
This is diving in deep. It was to do with drip feeding machine tools. This is really going in deep. I was at the threshold of the change between paper tape, and you may even look at me and go, "What do you mean, paper tape?"
I used to work in AT&T, and I was the goon who had to pick up the tape reels, like a Superman movie, and literally load them off. I was like midnight till 6 a.m. and I was the one in this room, and it was NHS data apparently. And if it got stuck, the tape reel, I just had to take scissors and some sellotape. That was the high-tech fix at the time.
Well, so in the world I was in, these tapes would drive a machine tool. The machine tool would have very little memory, so the tape would just drip, 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 feed. And the screensaver, it was because the normal screensavers weren't multitask aware. This was the problem. I mean, we're talking about Windows 3.11. We aren't, and it was it wasn't a standard implementation. So the screensaver that I had to do, I mean, I did work with some of these serious propeller heads. They didn't write my code. They would just say, "Oh, call that routine." And they do it in such a way. I remember getting a lecture once. Don't ring me up and ask me how to do something. Ring me up and tell me exactly what you've done, and I will appraise it and tell you your next steps. I mean, it was good advice, but delivered pretty brutally. So I think that's a good apprenticeship, really. And so anyway, working at CSM, I loved it, really.
So what did you do after CSM? Like, what have you done between, if we kind of fast forward a bit, we're here in 2026, where I think the real value is, you've seen a lot of shifts in software. So how does that dovetail to like, where were you working at the time? Because I know that you've had your own businesses for like 28 years, almost 30 then.
Yeah, crikey, yeah, it is. So I went.
Don't sound so happy about it.
Well, I've got a feeling that experience is going to become a virtue again. Old age is not going to be seen as a hindrance.
Retirement, put out to pasture.
Well, we kind of probably jumping ahead a bit, but I think that I don't know if you guys get it, because as soon as you get past 30, probably you get civvies, as you want to call them, saying, "Oh, the young people must be teaching you a thing or two." And you're kind of thinking, well, you wouldn't say that if I was a medical consultant, would you? So, but now, bear with me. Now with AI, the experience is everything. Actually, the ability to be young and pick things up very, very quickly is not as valuable as actually having that 30 or 40 years knowledge. And I'm hoping. I think it actually could well be true that the gnarly old 59-year-old engineer, chief engineer of the 1970s, is now the gnarly 59-year-old development guy who's seen it all and been there and can direct the AI in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd add one caveat to that, because I've come across quite a few our age group as well, Sean. Like, we're both like, well, I don't know how old you. I know you're past 50, Sean. Now I'm approaching 50, but yeah. Sorry, the point was, I'm meeting in my business life,
Yeah.
software development teams that comprise of like everybody from, you know, your intern graduates all the way through to your seasoned pros. And I think you're exactly right what you just said, but only if you adopt AI.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a huge ostrich moment happening in software development where teams are not even, they don't want to look at it through fear, and they don't. So when you talk to the 50-year-old programmer in the corner, you say, what AI you use? Oh, I used it once, got a rubbish result, I'm not going to use it again. And it's like kind of palm in the face moment.
Well, it is, and I, you know, I do worry that companies like Anthropic are actually herding us like cattle to eat, and they might actually eat us all. But at the moment, I look at it as a business owner and think, yeah, you crack on,
Yeah.
because you're committing suicide in business terms. This is an insane way to proceed. It's
Yeah.
utterly madness. I went down a contracting route. As I said, everybody was going to Y2K. I ended up at TNT. There was a bit of time in America where we did a whole load of stuff.
That's not dynamite.
No, TNT, as in, of course, they don't exist anymore, do they? You know, the couriers. Yeah, logistics. Yeah, well, it was worldwide, which was the couriers. And for a very long time, if you ever signed any of their manifests, their delivery forms, whatever, it was software that Resolve had actually designed to run it. We did some great stuff. But I mean, we chanced our arm again, a sliding doors moment. IR35 came in while me and Greg, who started Resolve together, were both working there. We were worried about how it was going to affect us. And the pair of us just went into one of the dev managers, relatively senior guy, and said, I still can't believe we did this. Why are you wasting your time with these contractors? We'll do fixed price work for you. And I remember him sort of looking, well, gentlemen, I'll have a think and I'll come back to you. There may have been a liquid lunch consumed before that conversation.
Surprised you didn't start a podcast off the back of it.
Didn't have podcasts
Well, we went back to our desks, and I think both Greg and I were probably thinking, "Oh Christ, what have we done? This could end very badly." And he came back and he said, "Okay, guys, yeah, you're on. I'm going to start you with a small project." And this was 2001, and you'd think a small project would be a couple of thousand, but it was about 14,000. And I think by the end of that year, we 350, 400,000 pounds worth of work. I mean, we were flying, and we thought naively we were going to be millionaires, but we forgot the whole fact that you have to sell your services to other people as well. We didn't learn that lesson for a long time. We saw the trend, and a big trend, in outsourcing. It was interesting.
It's like one of the biggest shifts, wasn't it? Is the outsourcing, the evolution, and the kind of the kind of IT leaving the UK, really.
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, we had a number of people that we didn't employ as PAYE. There were guys we worked with as contractors that we could trust, that we would parcel up pieces of work, and they loved it because it was fixed price too. It was a really symbiotic relationship all around. It worked really well. That work narrowed and contracted, and again, just a guy that I knew had got a business. Again, do you remember computer fairs? Bloody sports centres or whatever, used to have one every weekend. And this guy was, it always cracks me up actually. He'd applied to an advert that said how to get rich. Buy this book and we'll tell you how to get rich. And we all thought, you idiot. And the book said, buy second-hand computers, or computers rather, are going to be the future. This was quite good stuff. He started a business. He used to go to the local tip, do a deal, buy computers. He got in way over his head by his own admission. He started to pick up businesses. He couldn't cope with them. He was sending me, as a mate, inquiries all the time. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Because remember my background, that kind of fits.
Yeah, the electronics.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of fits. And he got to the point where he said, do you want this work? Greg was in Birmingham. I was in Malvern. We didn't need offices. But we were seeing our user base being cannibalized, as it were. Not our user base, sorry, our work being cannibalized. It was just disappear. You could see they were going to get rid of us eventually. It was going to happen. And we didn't stop the software work. We wanted to carry on. We loved it, really. I mean, I still do. I still find it the most fulfilling job I've ever had. But there's nothing so unfulfilling as not being able to pay your mortgage. So this work started to come in, and it started to build. And we ended up, I think at one point we had about 14 employees. We had some good stuff. Yeah, the sales was always always a
So
problem.
what was that company? That was an
That was
MSP.
Resolve, the same
I was
company.
like, that's managed service
Yep.
provider.
Yeah, it went from like a break fix to managed service provider. We saw that whole transition to managed service provider. We went through all of that. And then there were some quite sort of big changes, sort of more personal changes really. 2015, change with the company, contracts not renewing, and the company shrunk down to just 3 or 4 of us. But I still kept my hand in. I got approached by somebody that knew I wrote software, who worked for a massive company doing flexible packaging, and they wanted some software that would measure the size of microscopic holes. And when I say microscopic, I'm talking 90 microns. You can't see these with the naked eye, and they're so small, water molecules won't even go through. It's quite remarkable. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, but what they were explaining to me is that when you wrap produce, there have to be these holes to allow carbon dioxide to go out, I think it is, and oxygen to come in. You have an oxygen transmission rate. And they said, we'll give you all the calculations, you write the software to measure the holes, then we'll work out the permeability, and then we'll have quality control on our film. Brilliant project, really highly technical project again. And again, one of these ones that you start and you're thinking, oh my God, this company turns over £1 billion a year. If I get this wrong, they'll eat me for breakfast. And they didn't. And we've had a support contract with them every year since. And so we kept our hand in. We do little bits of software. That happened. Occasionally we do little bits. And then so the penny drop moment, how did I get from there to AI? It was about 2022, 2023. I can't remember exactly when. It was probably just after GPT 3.5 and just before GPT 4. And I didn't even know what they were. I used to read Twitter a lot when it was called Twitter. And my feed was getting filled with stuff about chatbots. And I really hadn't got a clue. Well, as I got a clue, it just didn't, what were they on about? I just ignored it. And a really good guy, web designer, was looking to do some work with us. And he said, oh, you really need to look at this. It's really interesting. And I saw an article the same day on the internet, on the web, I can't remember where. And it was explaining exactly how it worked. And it was explaining the sort of stuff that it could produce. And I was like, this is interesting. And then at the bottom, it had the killer sentence. It said, this article has been written by ChatGPT. And I almost fell off my chair. Because I'd come from the world where, if you wanted to parse language, you use regular expressions. You search for this, that, or the other. And I'm going, what the hell is this?
Yeah. It was a bit unfathomable.
Well,
I don't know what the word is.
It was like, if you're a car lover, it's like being given the keys to a brand new Lamborghini. Like, what can I do with this? And probably the direct sequence of events is probably a bit dull, but I know that a very short period of time afterwards, I started copying and pasting emails into ChatGPT and saying, well, I'll tell you why, because I immediately saw I could make something of this if I could work out how to do it. There was a client, an ex-client, they got taken over, and they were bidding off anybody that answered the phones, right? And they would just say, you've just got to go by email. And I could see, because as an MSP, it's common sense, I guess, but I'm going out to customers all the time. And you see business processes, you see what people do. You don't get involved in telling them whatever, but you sometimes think, what are you doing that for? Or that's bad news. And these guys were drowning in email. It was horrendous. And I thought, if I could write something that could find out what the category of the email was, I could forward it to the proper department. No, they didn't hang around long enough for me to pitch it to them, which is a bit of a shame, actually. So I pasted an email into ChatGPT. I went, tell me what type of email this is. There was a bit more to that, but not much. Nothing particularly complex. And it came back, this is this is not spam, but it is a marketing email, blah, blah, blah. And I went, right, tell me in one word. And then I just started pasting emails in, and it just went spam, sales, accounts. And I thought, right, if this has got an API, I'm in business. Now, I'm a Delphi programmer, right? Okay, I am that old. I'm still a Delphi programmer. And this is where for me it is a bloody sea change, because I'm not using it to write code. I was using Delphi to call the API. Okay, Delphi's not, I mean, you can make it web-based, but it's not really designed for that. And for a thick client, plugging into Outlook, wow, yeah, I've got it cracked. If anybody wants something to do that, I've done it. It's great. It's amazing. And I was like, this is just brilliant. And I was getting, with GPT 3.5, about an 83% success rate, which doesn't sound that good. GPT-4 came out, well, went to 99%, and I was like, happy days. But the problem was, and I think you mentioned this in one of your other podcasts, is this has got a cost.
Yeah.
This has got a cost that everybody looks at ChatGPT and go, oh, and it's free. Yeah, but once you start counting tokens, you know, and if I get a product that classifies emails and it costs £200 a month, even if that gives you a net saving of £1,000, you know, I think most people don't do that math. They just go, no, I'm not paying.
They don't see the tangible £1,000 though, do they? It's not like something that goes on the credit card. It's human time. Yeah. It's a different thing to actually tangibly equate it and get like an ROI from that automation.
Yeah. Yeah. So at that point, I was off. I developed internal stuff to do task analysis. I started extracting tasks out of Outlook. And I still think it's powerful stuff. We use it internally, but we've moved on massively. Because I go to, there's two things, and I know you shouldn't really be a campaigner in business. So I'll try not to turn this into a campaign, but when I started in business, you'd go into an office and people would have in trays if they were important enough. And you could tell if that person was overworked or incompetent, you wouldn't know which, if their in tray was up here. It was a visible sign. And more often than not, it was overworked, not incompetent. Don't want to go down that route, but you kind of get where I'm coming from. Now, what I see with email, and this is an almost weekly occurrence, is, and I think the mental health side of this is underplayed, it's a bloody huge problem. There are people who are drowning in this stuff, okay? And it's really, for me, looking at this as a business owner, not as a developer, this is a crisis. You can't manage what you can't measure is absolutely true, and nobody's measuring this as far as I can see. Nobody's looking at this. Nobody's looking at workload. Nobody's looking at outputs. Maybe in call center type environments they are, but I'm not convinced. And the amount of times I've gone into an office where somebody has said, oh, did you email Dave about whatever? And you see them look up with that knowing look, and the never bullshitter. Oh, did you email me about that? They know full well they've been emailed, but they're not going to admit it. But it's human. I say never bullshitter. I'm not saying I've not done it. It's that horrible panic moment that you've forgotten. And the thing is, the guy that's asked you to do it has probably forgotten too, because he's just thought, oh, it hasn't been done. And I thought, if I can flag this so that everything you ask for gets flagged, that you can go back and go, I've asked for this, and this. This is the task management sort of expansion, so that it's there. I mean, I went a little bit stage further with nudging people, but I've been told that's probably not a great idea. It's automating management, but yeah, we can do that. And looking at how many emails people are getting and classifying them. So yes, that's kind of where we went with AI at the time. But the massive sliding doors moment for me was probably actually fairly recently. It was
so it begin with a C.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, I developed my software. It got bigger and better. I was using Claude not as Claude Code, but just as copy and paste, and it did very well, to be fair. Then I briefly moved to Gemini because its context window was so massive.
Yes,
and you get this arms race, don't you? You know, Claude is now the best, then Gemini is now the best, and so I am one of those people with an enormous personal AI bill, and I wear it as a badge of honor. It's great. My wife's not impressed, but there we go. I was doing all of that. I got asked to do to quote for a portal for somebody, and I did the whole thing, what I would call managed AI coding. It wasn't truly Vibe. It was very highly managed, but it wrote the code because I didn't know how to do it, but I could read it and understand it. It was web development. Okay, that was my weakness. It's always been my bloody weakness. People would ask me for things, and I'd give them a thick client, but we want it web-based. Oh, no, it's much better like this. Yeah, well, it wasn't. I'm being a bit hard on myself, but that's that twisting round to avoid difficult problems.
It's staying in your lane, isn't it? Because
exactly.
you know that technology. So why wouldn't I build it in my tech stack? Whereas I think that's evaporated.
Yes, it's obliterated. I did this portal, did it for great price for everybody. I mean, seriously, it was, and it's worked brilliantly. And I really loved the way AI helped me do it. Then I got into, I wouldn't say an argument, I got into one of those, not with a client, but with a supplier. In the MSP world, I can't really speak about any others. I'm sure it's probably the same in other vertical markets. You get management tools and they like to tie you down to 1, 3, 5-year contracts. And the people that you speak to are called account managers, but I tend to think of them as something much less pleasant than that. And it's a necessary evil. They're polite enough, but their whole reason for living is to take money off you and tie you down. And there was an issue with a contract that got auto renewed, and it made me think, I need to have a look at my other contracts. I need to see what's going on here. And one of them is for a product. You'll all understand when I say a product that contains all of your customers, all of your invoicing, all of your tickets, all of...
It's like a management system. It's like a management system for MSPs.
Yeah, in our world, they call it a PSA. These companies love these because you cannot migrate from them easily. You're looking at 6 months to do this, right? I was furious that I was in this position, and I thought, I'm not having this. And I knew that this was expiring soon. And I really just took a flying leap at Claude Code, and I said, do you know this product? Do you know about its REST API? Yeah, got that. That's here. It's in GitHub. It's free and it's well used. And I've said, can you do X, Y, and Z, export the data? And it came back and said, yeah, I can do all of that for you. I can put a web front end on it. I can put rate limiting with back off. I can put it in a local database, and I can give you a full view on it so that you can see it. And if you want, I can make it so that you can make local changes. And I went from nothing to a complete export, and that's been since 2011, in about 4 hours. And at that point, I just thought, wow, okay, this has just changed everything.
It's really interesting that it's not what I expected you to say, because I was expecting you to say about the fact that you started with like trying to reverse engineer it, but you didn't. You started with, I need my data first, and then I'll work out how to reverse engineer it. And I think that's a really, really interesting point of how your brain works, because that was your problem, wasn't it? It was you were held to ransom effectively by a contract in terms of all your data is in there, so you auto renew. So you didn't solve the problem of features. You didn't go down the route of like, I'm going to just go and instantly replicate this. I'm going to safeguard my business, de-risk it, and get all the data. And like you say, because there's an API, for anyone who doesn't know, that means you can query your data securely, and you've took a copy of it, and then I presume you're able to then rebuild a brand new portal.
Well, this is it. But I'm in a position of strength because they do, and it's a commercial world, I get it. There's no big drama here, but I want to safeguard my business. I want to be able to make the choice, because it hasn't expired. We've got some months to go. Yes, I wanted that data, and I think it's important to say, I didn't say use Delphi. I didn't say that. I just said pick the best tool for the job, and it picked Go to build the executable that went and did all of this. And it used Node and TypeScript for the front end, and it used SQLite for the local database to store it in. And it said if you and I kind of feel that it's gone on from. I mean, look, I can remember when I first used it to write code, I wanted to see how it could connect to the Graph API in 2023. And I remember Bard. Remember Bard? My God. I remember asking it, and the crap that it came out with was embarrassing. No wonder they got rid of it. It was so bad, it brought shame on them. And I thought, well, this isn't really going to help us much. But now you get a product that says, I can do this, 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 and this. It's not always right first time. And I know there will be programmers in the background screaming at, and I know this is true. Yes, but did you check it for safety or whatever? Yes, and they're absolutely amazing.
So that's where your experience comes in, because what's happening is it's very different, like you said, from a vibe coder. On the surface level, it looks like the same thing. You're creating a spec, you're putting into an AI engine, and then it's producing some code. But because of all your years' experience, it's when we go back to AI is the hammer. You give a hammer to a carpenter, you give a hammer to a total novice, you'll get a very different result. And so you put all those guardrails, all those safeguards in to protect the thing that gets produced. But fundamentally, you don't need to spend 80% of the time writing the physical code, because code is commodity now. It's
Oh,
totally commoditized. The biggest shift I've seen, just to interject, is and I see this every single week now, is, and you've alluded to it as well, which is why it's relevant, is that as a developer, often we wanted to be the best at a particular programming language. So you know how
yeah,
you talked about Delphi, and
yeah,
you know, you do go through multiple
yeah,
languages. Like I've done ASP.NET, I've done Flash, I've done Direct-to-Lingo,
yeah,
I've done you know, PHP for years, and then Ruby on Rails, so Ruby. Now I think a developer becomes agnostic.
yeah.
Like, it is exactly what you talked about. You wrote in something called Go that you'd probably never even heard of at that point,
No,
but it's the technology is able to suggest the best tool for the job. And then most programming languages all adhere to the same fundamentals, don't they?
yeah,
It's syntax that's different, but fundamentally there's variables, you know, there's logic breaks and things like that, and conditional logic. So actually, if you reverse engineer out and go, being a programmer, what do I want to build? What's the outcome? And then what are things I want to do? But you keep the actual technological thing, you query it with an LLM, you'll get a much better product, because you won't be fighting
absolutely.
against your
Yeah,
own skill set to go, no, it has to be built in Ruby on Rails, or it has to be built in, you know, Delphi or whatever.
yeah, 100%. And so, and I think this might well change, but what I was, so I look at a lot of these things in terms of, I'm not always looking in terms of how I can sell them, although that is becoming, not sell them, as in how it can help my business. What I'm thinking is, if applications have got APIs, and most of them have, you know, you're looking at Sage, you're looking at Salesforce, you're looking at QuickBooks, you're looking at Xero. You know, for me, dealing with customers now who want projects that would have cost 20 or 30,000, which aren't really big projects, they're really small and insignificant, are going to get them for a couple of grand, okay, and you know, for 20, 30, 40 quid a month, and it's going to be quick. And that to me is a real power. And where I do try to focus the AI is look at what it's producing, so that whatever, I love the idea of Go now because it's self-contained. You know, with Python, it's a little bit more tricky to stick on a computer in a with a that hasn't got a server or whatever. It's going to be doing it locally, so that gets a bit specific. So that's the experience. It's the gnarly old fart who kind of knows what's going to work and what doesn't work. You know, I don't want to use a language just because it's the latest thing.
So Tim, do you think, because it was interesting, I was reading an article yesterday from Indeed, they're like one of the biggest recruitment companies worldwide. We've all seen the annoying adverts. And they were saying that actually computer-related projects, so software developers, are actually getting more jobs because they're servicing the needs of AI for the automations. So it's a bit like what you were saying there. It's like, if there's a problem, that's where we're going to come in and fix it, isn't it, with AI? Where that continues and how
I think so.
exponentially it will go, I don't know. But I think
so.
yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I do. I suppose my challenge in business is, and I think all of us in tech have this problem, is we think sometimes that we're communicating clearly to our customers, our peers, and they're going, I don't get what you're talking about. And I'm, you know, I'm very technically driven, and I want to sort of say to some of these clients, look, we can really help you with that process, and it's not for the sake of doing it. You know, if we do this, yeah, there's going to be a cost, but it's not going to be that. It's going to be relatively small, and you can have a tangible benefit from it. But I still think there's a little bit of a, I don't really get what you're saying. I don't get this. We talked about our website. That website our website you looked at. I've just got to, you know, I've got to give full exposure here. I did that in 3 hours with Claude Code, and I said, I want this to be static, and it spewed it out. And that's not great news for web developers. But again, I gave it again with experience. I said what I wanted, and invited a discussion. It spewed it out, and you know, who's the best AI consultancy in Malvern? Just type that into Google. He says shoehorning it in there, fully SEO optimized. But that's the reality of it now. That is the reality. Things are changing so fast. It's a little bit unsettling.
I mean, the piece here of this whole episode that we've, you know, the reason we've invited you on, Tim, is obviously me and you through a network. Is I just knew that you had all this wealth of experience, and through today's episode, what you've done is you've really eloquently and entertainingly given us like your flash of your life story in terms of tech, right? So where you came from, and then what I'm hearing is the single biggest shift in that entire career is happening right now.
Like, yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
fair to say? It's unprecedented. And I think it's,
Yes.
it's very well somebody new, it's not us, but coming on other podcasts and saying, you got to do this, dev's dead. I'm guilty of that a lot, is talking really negatively about the software industry right now. But I think it's so reassuring to actually see and listen to you. And it's like a revitalization of it. It's like
Oh,
you
100%.
were a service engineer, you became a developer, then you went and did your career as a developer, then you set up a company as a software development company, then you became an MSP, and you've done that for like 28
Yeah.
years. And actually, when you light up, obviously this is audio, we can see you. When you light up is when you're talking about the art of the possible today, using things
100%.
and using technologies that you've never even potentially heard of until the LLM is going, take a look at Go or Rust or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Is like, it's for me, it's massive. It's like it's a positivity shot, if that makes sense, because
Okay.
it's based in experience, and it's based in very, very complex software development life cycles coming through to today, and realizing, well, actually, not only can you vibe code, you can build amazing code, if that makes
Oh,
sense. That's
it,
like, and
yeah.
that's the experience, which is what you said. So to me, it was like the shift is unprecedented.
It's not only unprecedented, it's captivating, to be quite honest. Once I realized, so I think a really important point that I want to make here, really important point, I think this is really relevant to people that listen to this podcast, is my history has been littered with projects that I've started over Christmas or in summer holidays to solve a problem within the business that get abandoned after 1, 2, 3 weeks because either life gets in the way, because I hit a problem that I just haven't got the manpower or the money to get round, or just simply haven't got the time. I just can't do it. And wow. So I talked about the website. There wasn't a show about doing a website. It was, I desperately needed to get that done. Bang, done, ticked. I needed to get signatures on my emails. Bang, job, ticked. My software, I needed to move it from a thick client to a thin client, ticked. This is in the last month. And I haven't worked less. In fact, if I sound manic, I feel a little bit manic because I'm waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning thinking, oh, can I do that? Can I do that? And what's a bit bizarre is becoming a conductor rather than a typing. Somebody said, how the hell did we ever type all of this software out in the past? And, I'm asking, and I get 2 AIs on the go, and you can do this. If you've got things in your mind that you want to get done, there has never been a better time, and it's not going to get any worse. It's truly a fantastic time to be alive. If you want to get things done, write software, and all those little things that the big software houses probably wouldn't touch. And you think, yeah, but I need this. I need something that will just look at whenever I order something and it just alerts people that it's been ordered. It just I was saying earlier, like batch files back in the day. These are like web-based portals that you can do rather than, there's a product everybody's going to know, Microsoft Excel. Go on to Wikipedia and look at the history of Excel. And I can remember every time a new version of Excel came out, you think, oh, wow, look at that. And yet it was every 3 or 4 years. But what we're getting is, yeah, you're laughing, is it? Exactly. What we're getting is every 3 or 4 bloody weeks now.
Yeah. I mean, the latest Claude that dropped is it's insane because it's got inbuilt agent teams, doesn't it? So like you described about, not only can the human run multiple Claude projects at the same time doing different parts on systems, but then you've got this conception to understand that there's ingrained into it is these agent teams doing parts of the execution of the actual task to be done. So I think what you're saying is like we're all shifting from these builders to be the conductors, like you said. And then secondly, it's just that so much work is being completed, actually done and delivered than ever before. Because the bottleneck in the past was time and capacity, wasn't it? It's like I would do those things, but I don't have the resources. I would do that project, that special project, because it will change my business, but it's going to require too much time. all of that, if you chunk it down, you can literally tackle things 90 minutes a day if you wanted. And you
Yeah,
could take a
absolutely.
massive project, a game
Yeah,
changer for your business or your teams. And I think when people do adopt automation, like you said, what you've been doing is taking out the mundane in the business. What's left? Special projects.
yeah,
It's the one-off
100%.
things to complete, and things are actually getting done. And that's the excitement for me. Is it's the stuff in my business I'm witnessing that we would never have done. We'd just be focused on the urgent or the reactive, or
Yeah,
we'd just be in project delivery. Now we're doing stuff that's the important stuff I've had on my to-do list for 3 years is getting done.
yeah,
And it's
Good.
like, this
yeah,
is stuff that I genuinely think will move the needle in the classic business sense. It's the stuff will
yeah.
make the boat go faster. And it's like, I think it's yeah, I'll shut up now because I do this.
Oh, I get it, Paul. I absolutely get it, and I think you're talking about orchestration of agents, and I can give another example that from an IT support point of view, which because Claude Cowork I know it's not strictly software development, but is a kind of a sister product, isn't it? And this is where LLMs are coming in. We had an incident that just kept recurring of a shared server slowing down, and I won't go into the whole detail. It was a bit dull, but it ended up just being a massive document of performance parameters that we needed to look through. We couldn't do it, and LLM had to. And Claude Code said, paste it here. And I said, I can't, it's too big. And it said, oh, that's not a problem. I can do that offline with separate agents that can have their own context windows. And you're like, whatever. And, and the result of that was that it spotted that a client was using a spreadsheet that was written in 2003. And they'd copied it every year. And did you know, the key takeaway here is that in old versions of Excel, if you applied formatting to a row, it applied it to 4,000, 4 billion, was it, or 4 million? 4 million cells, regardless of how many you selected. Okay, so you then take that 20 years later and you've copied and pasted it as new sheets every time. No wonder every time they open that spreadsheet. But if I hadn't had AI with agents, because it was so big, to be able to split that open and go through it all and say, there's your problem. And then
Yeah.
it says, do you want a VBA script to clean this up? And you kind of meekly go, yeah, okay, please.
We've
And
got
it comes out.
we've got a really good example of just like you talk about the depth of analysis that it can do and stuff that again a human you wouldn't dream of doing this. So we're working with a company software team, and we're not like them, but I understand why they are because they're much bigger. But for them, it's about policy and convention. So they have lots of developers in different Scrum teams, and what they're really passionate about is code conventions. So they want all the code across all the systems to look and feel the same, so that any developer rightfully can pick it up and not look at some wacky person's way of solving a problem. So
Yeah.
they came to us with the problem of how do we use Claude, or how do we instill code conventions across our teams? And at the moment, it's a problem because they're not doing it. Is it the senior developer has to look at every pull request and do a visual check of code conventions? So there's obviously tools on the market you can use in your IDE and stuff, but first you got to define them. So we just said, okay, you're not using AI, but we'll show you a live demo on our system. So we've been using AI to write code for at least, it's fully writing code since December. But we went back and we said, right, we've got a project here, it's 10 years old. Go back pre-2023 and go and do an analysis of the code conventions that are used across this project. And it came back within 5 minutes with 30 parameters. So then the human then goes and checks that, they agree with those conventions. Okay, so that's all very well and good. So we've got our code conventions documented. Okay, now in GitHub, go and create an agent that gets kicked off that on every pull request talks to Claude via MCP and goes and checks that it adheres to the code conventions. Don't necessarily reject the pull request because we might not want to be that harsh with it, but it will report back where this pull request is in violation of code conventions, and it will auto create a pull request to fix the code convention standards. And like we're at the point now where on certain projects at certain thresholds that are met, we're auto committing like our pull requests. And so obviously they wouldn't, but I'm just like, it's something that's you just wouldn't do it. I don't know how you would do it other than an IDE like Rubu or whatever you use in different languages, but it's still reliant on the developer to adhere to it. Do you see what I mean? Is even if you
Yeah, I
have
do.
something built into your IDE that checks your code conventions, you still disable it. You still ignore what it's saying. You can't really, So it was
It's
just an
funny because
example of it's that data analysis and that context window, and it was done, and we were watching it live, and it took about 5 minutes the whole end-to-end setup. But it was exactly as you described. He uses Emacs because he's a proper geek, and you could see it spin up Emacs windows for each agent. So he's like, he runs this thing, and it goes boof, and his screen's full of windows of different agents doing different analysis. And that's the stuff that I'm like is important.
yeah.
But you would never ever get to that in a small dev team.
No.
But if you now bring on somebody or another bot, even like another agent to write the code, the Claude itself is going to adhere to those conventions that you want.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
So yeah, it's a long-winded example, but it was just when you were talking about context windows and Claude and Teams and stuff. It's just for me, it's absolutely.
And Paul, are you guys checking the code now? Are you actually looking at it, or
Yeah,
it seems like that you're getting quite confident that the code that's been written by the AI agent there is good enough for you to
it's
say
really good.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
good. It's I think that it's doing things as well in a way where like our developers, the way we've got it is our developers are responsible for effectively architecting what needs to be done. Their responsibility is garbage in, garbage out, isn't it? So your responsibility is to produce the requirements for the Claude to go and build. If it builds the wrong thing, it's not Claude's fault. Does that make sense? It's that what do we put in? And they're using AI to help to generate those PRDs and stuff. And that will touch on performance, security, accessibility, all the things we need it to do go into the PRD. Then Claude and its agents go and develop the systems. When it gets all the way through to pull requests, we're typically reviewing it. And when we're auto merging, it's in the like 1% examples. So we're reviewing it. But my developers have reported back to me they're seeing new ways of writing code that they haven't seen before. There's like, if they would have done it, they would have done it like X and it's done it like Y. And then they can have a conversation with Claude, which is what you described, to say, well, explain this to me. Why have you done it like this? The danger I find that vibe coders especially struggle with is they don't put the effort into this isn't all vibe coders, so it's not a slur. But if you don't do the human deep thinking on the PRD, what Claude and other LLMs will always do is at the end of doing a job, it would say, would you like me to do this as well? And it was perpetual. That will never stop asking you. So you have to have a clear definition of done. You have to be able to say, no, don't do that. Because we've had scenarios when we first adopted anyway. It's like it'd do the task and then it'd say, oh, would you like me to apply like a progress uploader to that area? Oh, yes, please. Okay, it's done that. Would you now like me to tidy up the UX on it? Yes, please. And it's like you could sit there. So you take your website 3 hours. I know for a fact other people who don't have your experience of the project lifecycle who are still there 30 hours later when it should have took 3 hours.
yeah,
And the
'cause you
reason
keep
they're still there is they
modifying,
don't have it done. And you've talked about so many tasks being completed. I would hazard a guess because you are able to say that's done, tick, move on. And a lot of people are not launching these micro SaaS applications that they've developed because they're ultimately afraid of showing it to people and getting real feedback.
Well,
And so it's like when it's in my possession, I can't be ridiculed, or it's the imposter syndrome, isn't it? At the moment, I'm coding something. So again, a bit.
It comes back to what Tim was
segue.
saying that us older developers or engineers will have a degree of usefulness in the future because we have that ability to know when something's done rather than keep changing because you're right, the AIs all do that, don't they?
I think we undersell. I think probably the three of us here probably would undersell ourselves. Actually, I think so. I talk about that website, and you think, I knew about how I wanted it to be. I knew how, the state of the HTML that I wanted. I knew how to put the Google Analytics in, or that it needed to be in there. That I knew about X, I knew about Y, I knew about Z, and so on. So that's that gnarly old Git syndrome, And as
But it's knowing the questions to ask, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's the thing, is if you know the questions to ask, like I wouldn't know anything about being a florist at all. I wouldn't have a clue. But if you're a florist in front of AI, wow, can you get some stuff done? Even though it won't necessarily today do the flowers for you, every other aspect of your business, from sales, marketing, operations, PR, whatever you want to do, you know, the 9 core departments of any business function, it can touch every area. And I bet you can have a world-class customer and prospect journey that you dreamed of implementing, but you never had time to. And it's exactly what you described, is it's knowing your industry and using all that expertise to then use AI as a multiplier to then achieve greater things than you've ever, a higher quality than you've ever achieved before, in a faster time than you've ever achieved before.
Yeah, as I say, your enthusiasm and your imagination sometimes is the bloody limit. You
It is,
really push it on.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, this has been incredibly raw and honest, and time has got away again, Paul.
It has. So much for our 20-minute episode, Tim.
Well, I hope it's been useful.
It's been really useful. I think given that view of the trajectory of the last 30 years, 40 years of the software, you know, your lived experience of the software industry, and it brings us to today, and it's just mad.
So where can listeners find all about you and see what you're building at Resolve Tech?
At the moment, probably our website is the best place. We've just updated the website, so it should be good enough, shouldn't it, really? That's the best place. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Happy to talk to people on there.
Great. Well, thanks again, Tim.
Cheers. Thank you, Tim. Much appreciated.
All right. Good stuff.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Control-Alt-Dev. A huge thank you to our guest today, Tim Winstanley, a name that sounds powerful, and absolutely he lived up to it. Tim shared some serious insights into building practical, scalable solutions, particularly in the MSP space, and his vision for how AI integrates into managed services was both groundbreaking and forward-thinking. No hype, just real implementation thinking. Tim, we generally appreciate you joining us today. And of course, to your listeners out there, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe, share it with someone navigating AI inside their business, and join us next week as we continue cutting through the noise around technology, automation, and what it actually means for business leaders.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.